Even though I, you. As I composed those thoughts for the message title, I realized it sounded like saying the vowels. Even though I, you. And really, this piece of scripture, just like the vowels, are a building block of language. This is a building block of faith. You probably have Psalm 23 either memorized completely or are so familiar with it that it would not take you long. I remember the first time that I heard Psalm 23 in public. I had just become a Christian, and even I, in my lack of exposure, was familiar with it. I was at a cross-country meet, and it began to storm. And we had one of those pop-up temporary shelters that we got in, and lightning was striking, and thunder was rolling, and it was getting dangerous. And a young man from one of the other cross-country teams that was there from another team pulled out a Bible and began to sarcastically say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And in that preacher voice that is so just kind of renowned in the Bible Belt, he began to belt out sarcastically until shut down by one of the coaches that was there. That young man got struck by lightning. No, I'm just kidding. that didn't happen. But that's what we thought was going to happen because of that. And so that was my first experience publicly, and I will never forget it. Some people hear this at funerals and cling on to that comfort that they get. And some of us have this as a part of our life, as a giant piece of 6 verses, of comfort, but maybe we don't really think too deeply about it. And today, we'll get to dive into Psalm 23 just a little bit, and I want you to recognize really just two main things today as we get started. First, there's a dynamic at play even in the way that David, presumably as the author, is talking about God. There's a transition when you look at it. Perfectly right in the middle, He describes God as He. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But he goes on many times to say, He does this. He leads me. He restores me. Even though you is that transition. He goes from talking about God as He does this to you, God. In our life, we have to get to that place of transition. God does this. He does this. You, Lord, you are that for me. That would be that first thing. And then the second thing is that I want you to recognize that David, this is so simple, but so applicable for our lives. David saw God as my shepherd, in quotes. David had a shepherd. He describes his relationship to the Lord as the shepherd. Today, that's probably not that familiar to you. And so, overall, this is sort of the challenge for us all in a nutshell. Who is God to you? Who is God to you? Before we get there, before we dismiss so that you get that sort of homework assignment for the week, we look at who God is to David, and you will see that those same themes are alive and well in all of our lives maybe some of these themes aren't as real to us. Maybe because we have not faced a specific challenge, perceived something in our life, or maybe it's because we as sheep have run away and not experienced God's godness in that area. And so we're challenged to not run away. The Lord is my shepherd. The shepherd leads and guides. He leads. He actually takes the sheep to food. Makes sure that the sheep are nourished. God puts David in a state of content. I shall not want. No longer longing, if you will. It's easy to get into that state of discontent. It's easy to find ourselves looking around at other things and other places. The shepherd brings us back to content. Do you think that David is saying these things because it was just absolutely through and through what was experienced in David's life? I somehow doubt that that's true. David did not experience a perfectly peaceful life. We have stories where there is want, and there is getting, and there is wrong in David's life. David's life is not perfect. These words are spoken out of a state where he has to remind himself of who he is and who God is even more so. I shall not want. I'm not going to want anything because in God I am content. I have everything that I need. Why? Because God cares. God cares. God cares. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He makes me. We have a negative connotation with that. God made me do something. Really, I'm not sure that this is even in the language here. As I looked at it, I didn't really see it in the Hebrew, but I don't really know Hebrew so well. I have some tools that I use, but it looks like there has to be an inference placed into here with the language. But we don't need to see it as God forcefully making us to lie down in green pastures. If that upsets you, don't think of it like that. Think of it like Him providing rest and comfort in places of healthy growth. In green pastures, He's going to place us, He's going to allow us to have that place of peace and comfort. This reminds me of that conversation I continue to find myself in with God's irresistible grace. Is it resistible or is it not? Well, if God were to give us today a place of rest and comfort, and we were weary and struggling, we're not going to look at God's face and knowing that we can go sitting down in that place that He has made for us. We're not going to walk away and say, no, I want to choose that hard path. We're going to say, yes, thank you. He provides it. He leads David beside still waters. He's refreshed. He's refreshed and able to rest now. God not only cares, He provides, and He refreshes. He restores my soul. My soul here, soul can also be seen as life. He restores life. And you'll see that throughout the Gospels, one of which I've looked closely at throughout the past months. It's a beautiful one in John 5, where Jesus restores the person to a fullness. When He goes down to the portico with the 5 arches, the 5 pillars, and the man can't get into the water to be healed, Jesus says to him, rise, take up your mat, and be made whole. To be made whole is to be truly restored. He refreshes and restores. He leads us in right paths. Paths of righteousness could be the interpretation that you've seen. The reality is that we get ourselves off the path and we have an enemy who wants to help us to get off that path. He contributes, but God leads us, guides us, calls us, prompts us. The casual form of this word in Hebrew can be understood as the causal form of this word could be to be understood as to create an opportunity. He creates an opportunity for righteousness. We have an opportunity. God creates opportunities. Opportunities to make the right decision. I think that's what this is really referring to, don't you? He leads me in right paths. So it has something to do with discernment and making good decisions. To make the right decisions requires something from the Lord. There are many paths, and we really don't have the right path available without His leadership. Do you ever know people who get stuck in decision making? Man, I hate getting stuck trying to make a decision. I feel like that in so many ways in my life. I feel like I'm on pause in so many ways. I can't move forward. I mean, it happens to me in so many places. So if you know someone, like if I'm asking you if you know someone, you do. It's me. It's me for sure. Some people get stuck in that way, in a very bad way, where they truly can't make life decisions, day-to-day things. And some people even get to the place of being so super spiritual that they need God to tell them what pants to put on in the morning. And God bless them, Lord help them. You know, I mean, that's not my issue, and this is my advice. This has been my advice for a while, and I try to tell myself this too, and I think I live this way. Don't get stuck making the decisions. When you're a follower of Jesus, do what you think is right prayerfully, knowing that He leads you in paths of righteousness. You don't always know where that leadership comes from. But if you're making the wrong decision, there's a very good chance you're going to know it very quickly. And that's a comfort as well. He provides us with counsel. He is counsel. And David says, you are with me. God is present. Creator, present. Remember that David had reason to fear in life. He says that though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that's the version I'm used to. The NRSV says it a little bit differently. You are with me. He's present. And the one that none of us want to hear today, and Jess, if you would bring that up. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Remember last week, thank you. Feed my sheep, tend my lambs, feed my sheep, right? And we know that Peter got a push from the Lord. And the sheep sometimes get hit and tapped. And sometimes when we're stubborn, we get knocked. We get knocked as the sheep. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. How do we get to that place? How do we get to that place of being comforted? That's a challenge. We do that by knowing God's love and intention. But there is a sense of discipline. How many of you guys have been in classrooms and places where you have observed the value in a strict teacher? Think of classroom settings. I think that's the best place to observe this type of thing. When you were a student, back in the Civil War, I'm going to get some elbows and broken ribs myself, aren't I? I'll be with Mark. We'll be hobbling around together now. But think back in those days. Did you want a strict teacher or a super lenient one where you could just do anything? Anybody could do anything. talk to so many students that over and over will tell me that we like the strict teachers. We like it when we know what the rules are. We like it when we are controlled and there is a known purpose and there are guidelines and there are restrictions. It creates an atmosphere in which there is peace and learning. And Jesus does that for us. He is both kind and yet not so kind. We struggle with that description of who God is because we know that, like C.S. Lewis described him in the Chronicles of Narnia, he's not a tame lion. There is risk associated with who God is. You prepare a table before me, he says, in the presence of my enemies. Sometimes we need justice or vindication. Sometimes we need blessings. You anoint my head with oil and my cup overflows. And I'm going to just tell you in closing here, as David stops, the author stops describing who God is and really puts a summary on it. And he says that surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And that's the reality of being under the shepherd. We are pursued by God's goodness and mercy. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. And this is a great clue for all of us to remember the danger of misinterpreting Scripture like this. Do you think he really thought he was in God's house? Physically? No, obviously, right? But there's a certain sense of belonging in God. This tells us that we're not going to have everything become perfect. God's not going to just remove all of our physical problems. But when we are in God, we are pursued by his mercy and goodness. David knew the shepherd. It was the shepherd who cared for him, provided for him, refreshed him, restored him, counseled with him, disciplined him, delivered him, and even gave him justice. He sent goodness and mercy. And so today, I know all of these words are just like rocking your world, right? This is all new to you. You've never heard these descriptions of God before, ever, and you are so excited about it, you're ready to go out and to proclaim something that's just we're familiar, aren't we? That's the point. We are so familiar with these themes. And yet there's something here for us today. What is here for you? What is your story? Where do you need God to show up in your life? Remember what I said about David's writing of this? It's not that this was just through and through David and he just absolutely lived this day in and day out and it was so familiar to him. He wrote this because it was moments of realization. It was experience after experience where God was this for him and it became more and more real and he reminded himself and others. But your story will sound different. Your story could be as ridiculous as the Lord is my mechanic. I should probably continue that story. That might be a really fun one. The Lord is I've seen this on a bumper sticker. The Lord is God is my co-pilot. You could pursue that one. God is my teacher. God is my deliverer. God is my comfort, my peace. God is my pastor. God is my doctor. I don't know what God is for you today. There is certainly a big part of David's writing that resonates for me, and I have to tell you what that is. I have sensed over and over in my life this theme, and I can attest to it today just as David. God has given me opportunity. Over and over again, I sense an opportunity that I don't feel worthy of. I don't feel deserving of. I feel so privileged and blessed and just overwhelmed by the goodness and mercy that has pursued me through opportunity after opportunity. But what's your story? What's your story? And who would you call God when you describe him as the opportunity giver? If it's not shepherd, what is it? Is it mentor? I could see that. I could see that. God is my mentor. God is showing me the way. Who is God to you? I've heard people describe him as my Lord, and it be so striking. Even in the midst of memorials and funerals, as people are grieving, and they say, my Lord, my God, my Jesus, and they take ownership. And they talk not just about who he is, they transition into saying, you are this. And right in verse 4 at the beginning, 4a, David transitions. You. Even though I inject all of my humanness, you, Lord. So today, as we close, as I close this, I would say my encouragement would be to know your story. Write it down. And that's not easy. That takes thought. Would you write it down? How do you remind yourself of who God is to you? Write it down. And lastly, I just want to reemphasize that praise pulls you into worship, communion, and fellowship. He does this. He does this. Lord, you are worthy.